medical school interview mistakes that destroy your acceptance chances, and how to avoid them. Hey, BeMo Nation, welcome to another episode of our One Question podcast. My name is Meng Yang, and I'm joined by Thomas Edwards. We're both academic consultants here at BeMo. We have nothing to sell you today, just pure strategies, tips to help everyone get equal access to education. And in case you've never watched or listened to one of these before, they are completely unscripted. There's no fancy music, there's no fancy visuals or sound effects, just pure content. And we have 10 minutes today to tackle a new topic. And this week, our topic is medical school interview mistakes that destroy your acceptance chances and how to avoid them. So here we go. I'm going to start my timer for 10 minutes. Okay, so let's get going, Thomas. What is one of the most common interview mistakes that you've seen when you're working with students?
Yeah, absolutely. So while there are numerous different mistakes students can make, one that I see very frequently when working with students is really inadequate preparation. So for some reason, there's this notion that you can't really prepare for an interview, and that results in students not really putting in effort that they need to understand or to make sure that they understand how the interview is going to work and how they can approach the interview. So right from the get-go, I would say first and foremost, inadequate preparation is, to me, the number one, cause for mistakes in interviews.
And what needs to go into preparation? How long do you think it really should take for someone to go from not having any interview experience to being great at their medical school interviews?
Yeah, so obviously it depends from person to person, and it depends on when you find out about the interview, because some schools will give you 2 months notice, some schools may only give you 2 weeks notice. It really depends. But ideally, you want to give yourself as much time as you can to prepare to ensure that you are adequately prepared. And that way, when you show up to the interview, your preparation can translate to a strong interview performance, especially because an interview is really that last step in your medical school application. So it's really important to make sure that you do it effectively.
And just to give you an idea of what goes into an interview, it's not just about knowing some of the sample questions and thinking about possible answers in your head. It's not just about rehearsing points about what you can say about yourself or your motivations for pursuing medical school. There's a lot more kind of peripheral aspects of the interview that you want to be aware of. For example, you want to be working on your body language, your facial expressions. All of these things are habits that we all have that sometimes can be very hard to break and take a long time to develop good habits for. I've worked with students who have struggled with filler words. So ahs, lots of pauses in their speech. That is another aspect of oral communication that is extremely hard to correct and can take a really, really long time to fix. And so how do we kind of avoid this mistake, Thomas? I think I would usually recommend students at least 2 months of preparation just to fix up those habits. There's a lot you can do to make sure that you're getting rid of your filler words. I have them myself, and I have to be cognizant of that when I'm doing public speaking. But there are books that you can read, resources that you can use, that you can find online. But the most important thing is really to have consistent and repetitive practice and to be evaluating yourself and to get feedback about that. What's another big mistake that people make for their interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that last bit about feedback, because it is true. It's important to get feedback, but it's also, it's crucial that the feedback you're getting is from someone who is knowledgeable or kind of an expert in that field, right? You don't want to be just getting feedback from your friends or your classmates, because they may not really understand what goes into a strong interview performance. So while feedback is important, it's important that you get expert feedback who can really provide you nuanced feedback and nuanced guidance and how to improve that or improve your performance. Now, additionally, another way you can help improve your performance in addition to receiving feedback is having a strategy in mind when you actually approach that interview, having an idea of how you're going to approach each type of question or how you're going to, prepare your answer. Having that overall strategy is something that is really important. And I have found from my experience working with students, a lack of strategy is very, very apparent and can be very detrimental to a student's performance.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that too, where you pose a question to the student that you're working with, and their answer is very haphazard, very loosely thrown together. There's no real good flow or logic about their answer. And you can really tell they're just kind of pulling things from their mind as they come up, and it's just coming out as they present it to you, as they talk about their experiences or talk about how they would navigate a scenario. But we know that there are certain types of questions that you can encounter in an interview, and it's really a finite list of question types, right?
Yeah.
There's not going to be an infinite list of question types that you could encounter. You may not know exactly what the question is specifically, but if you can identify the broad category that it falls into, and you have a prepared strategy to work with. For example, if you get a personal question and you know that you need to use your own experiences as an example, talk about what you learned, talk about how it applies to your future profession or to your future education. If you know that you have to include those things, it's going to be a lot easier for you to come up with an answer that flows well, has good structure, and that makes sense to the interviewer and has an ultimate point, right? You always want to be making a point and giving the interviewer useful information about yourself. So having strategies is definitely really useful for that. Now,
Absolutely.
we've got a couple minutes left, and I wanted
Mhm.
to talk about something that's only come up recently, which is virtual interviews.
Yeah.
This never used to be a topic before, but a lot of students these days are conducting interviews virtually. So I think there are some extra things that students need to be aware of. What are some mistakes that you've seen students make with specifically conducting interviews in this virtual setting?
Yeah. So great point. Obviously, with the state of COVID in the last 2 years, virtual interviews have become somewhat of the norm. And I think because of this, there are a lot of adjustments that students have had to make, and some of them that they may not have really thought about that has resulted in not necessarily poor, but at least diminished performance. And the first and most important one is the idea that you need to make sure for a virtual interview that you're conducting it in a quiet environment with minimal distractions. You don't want to be distracted
Absolutely.
yourself, and you don't want the interviewer to be distracted by what's going on behind you. So having a neutral background with minimal distractions is the first and foremost most important part of a virtual interview. But then secondly, and while it may seem weird, you want to make sure you're still maintaining that eye contact with that person. So you're not looking off to the side, you're maintaining your gaze on your computer and showing the interviewer that you're attentive and that you're listening and that you're not somewhere else and that you are present in kind of that interview setting. And then lastly, one more quick point. Again, it may seem strange being kind of giving an interview to your computer, but again, that body language that we talked about earlier, having confidence, upright posture, smiling when you can, show your excitement. Those are all important things, especially in a virtual setting when you're providing an interview for medical school.
I think those are all really, really great points, Thomas, because when you're at home doing the interview, it's very easy to slip into the mentality of, the fact that you're at home, you're in a comfortable environment, and you lose a lot of the formalities and your presentation becomes less professional. So having all of these things in mind, making sure that you have a clean environment with no distractions, make sure you turn off your notifications on your computer, your emails, your social media, turn all of those things off, having that professional background, being dressed professionally. I know that a lot more students are coming to interviews dressed casually simply because they're at home, and you still want to be dressed professionally for your interview because it's a professional interview. You are trying to demonstrate the fact that you can be a mature and professional individual who will contribute to your field, and all of these things in terms of appearance and body language and presentation do play a big part. I think there's just one more thing that I would add, Thomas, and I don't know if you've encountered this when working with students. An interesting one, lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Lighting can be a big factor when you're conducting a virtual interview. If you're in a very dark room and you're not well lit, that is going to make a very different impression on the person who's interviewing you than if you're in a well lit room with lots of natural light and you are you are very visible to the interviewer, right? We know from cinematics and movies that lighting makes a huge difference in our experience. And you can definitely think about that when you are conducting a virtual interview. Okay, I think we're down to less than a minute, and that's all the time that we have to cover this topic. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you like this as much as we enjoyed making it for you, please go ahead and share it with a friend. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and make sure you ask any questions you have in the comment section. All right, thanks everyone. See you next time.